For centuries, the Picts have been treated like Scotland's historical glitch, a people who burst into the Roman world with terrifying precision, shattered armies, shaped borders, and then vanished so completely that even their language dissolved. Historians argued about them, archaeologists guessed about them, and everyone else filled the silence with myth, blue-painted warriors, cults of secrecy, symbols no one could decode. But then something happened. Bones from ancient Scottish graves were pulled from the earth. DNA, thousands of years old, was extracted, sequenced, and compared across Europe. And the results didn't just answer old questions, they demolished them. They revealed a story nobody expected, one hidden not in chronicles or carvings, but in the genetic code of people who never knew they carried it. Because the real shock isn't who the Picts were, is that they were never as mysterious, foreign, or lost as we were told. Ancient DNA has shattered the myth of the Picts, and what it uncovered rewrites the origin of Scotland itself. A people history could not capture. The Picts enter written history suddenly, too suddenly to make sense. In the 3rd century, Roman commanders described them as a coordinated threat, fast, tactical, impossible to predict. They slipped through forests, struck forts like lightning, and disappeared into terrain the Romans never fully mapped. To an empire used to open-field battles, the Picts felt like fighting smoke. And yet, outside Roman frustration, we have almost nothing in their own words. No written laws, no mythology, no royal chronicles. Their language is gone without even a fragment to translate. Their name itself isn't real. Picti was a Roman label, not what they called themselves. But their presence is carved into Scotland's earth. Symbol stones scattered across the highlands and lowlands bear spirals, crescents, double discs, mirrors, and beasts that defy identification. These images aren't random decoration. They repeat with mathematical consistency, suggesting clan identities, political alliances, or sacred cosmology, but no key has ever unlocked them. Their hill forts, some stretching across cliffs above the North Sea, were larger and more sophisticated than many Roman frontier forts. Their burial sites showed deliberate movement of bones, suggesting ancestor rituals unlike anything in neighboring cultures. Their inheritance system, kingship passing through the sister's son rather than the king's own children, left medieval chroniclers astonished. It wasn't the structure of a primitive tribe. It was the structure of a society outsiders simply could not decipher. But none of this answers the central mystery. Where did they come from? And why did they disappear? To solve that, scientists turned to the one record the Picts never intended to leave behind: their DNA. The myth of the warrior ghosts. For generations, the Picts were cast as a kind of northern mirage, fierce when seen in battle, invisible the moment the fight ended. Roman generals claimed they used coded signals in darkness, that they moved through fog like spirits, that they struck from places where no roads existed. It was almost an early form of guerrilla warfare. Rome responded the only way it knew, with walls. Hadrian's Wall was meant to hold them back. It didn't. The Antonine Wall was built even farther north. It failed too. But the Picts were never just raiders. They were sailors who controlled routes across the North Sea. They operated massive coastal strongholds like Burghead, whose final destruction by Viking fire melted the stone itself. They were artists who carved symbols no one else in Europe used. They were rulers who followed inheritance laws that elevated maternal lineage over paternal power, a system nearly unique in medieval Europe. At the Battle of Dunnecton in 685, they crushed the Northumbrian army so decisively that historians agree if the Picts had lost, Scotland, as an independent culture, might have ceased to exist. Northern Britain would have simply become an extension of Anglo-Saxon England. They didn't vanish because they were defeated. They vanished long after their greatest victories, and for reasons far stranger.
The DNA revolution. In 2023, a research team from the University of Aberdeen sequenced DNA from Pictish burials in northeastern Scotland, the first large-scale genetic study of verified Pictish remains. The results shocked researchers. First, the Picts were not outsiders, not migrants from the continent, not remnants of some mysterious pre-Celtic invasion. Genetically, the Picts were deeply rooted local populations, the direct descendants of Iron Age communities who had lived in what is now Scotland for centuries before Rome stepped foot on the island. Second, they were interconnected. Burials spread across vast regions showed shared ancestry, revealing a network of allied communities, not isolated tribes. They weren't scattered hill clans. They were a coordinated society with wide-reaching ties. Third, DNA from some Pictish individuals showed continuity into modern Scottish populations. This means the people themselves didn't disappear. They survived, integrated, and kept living on the same land their ancestors had defended. The truth is simple and astonishing. There was never a lost people. There was only a lost identity. The Picts did not die out. They became the ancestors of Scotland. How a culture can vanish without dying. If the Picts never biologically vanished, what happened to their identity? Some historians argue politics played the decisive role. As Pictish kingdoms merged with Gaelic-speaking neighbors, royal families borrowed new titles, adopted new customs, and unified under new political identities. Over generations, the name Pict simply faded from official use. Others point to culture itself. The Picts relied on symbols, oral traditions, and guarded knowledge rather than written texts. Their identity was encoded in rituals, lineage, and imagery, systems vulnerable to being overshadowed once Christianity, Gaelic script, and new political structures took hold. There's also the possibility that their very strength doomed their name. When Pictish and Gaelic kingdoms merged into what became Alba, the early kingdom of Scotland, the Pictish elite didn't fall. They became part of a larger whole. Their identity didn't collapse, it expanded. A culture built on secrecy and symbol simply melted into a wider Scottish identity, leaving little behind for historians to trace. The people stayed, the land stayed, only the name changed. The real origin and legacy of the Picts. Today, the Picts echo through Scotland in ways we rarely notice. In place names no one can translate, in legends of warriors who moved like shadows, in carved stone still resisting every attempt at decoding, in DNA of families who never knew they carried ancient signatures from Iron Age Scotland. Thanks to modern genetics, the myth of the Picts has finally been replaced by something far richer and more human. They weren't ghosts, invaders, or some isolated tribe. They were the descendants of Scotland's earliest peoples, locals with deep roots, complex alliances, powerful kingdoms, and cultural systems unlike anything else in Europe. They shaped the land, they defended it, and when the time came, they didn't vanish, they transformed. The Picts live on in the very identity of Scotland, not as a lost people, but as the foundations of a nation. Their symbols may remain unread, their stories may remain silent, but their blood, their legacy, and their land endured. The Picts did not disappear. They became Scotland.